Don't get personally attacked.
No.
Everybody gets social Lululemons.
And you don't kill your followers. This is Brooke's advice.
No, I just like, if the point of this conversation is
It was successful for a year.
Words.
Okay, so we're gonna cater to gun-toting yoga people. I like this. It's a large population. There's a lot of those out there.
I'm down for the BDSM state, so you just let me know how we start that.
You got no dad.
Oh, that's dark. Oh.
Each of the following individuals are friends and have always talked about bizarre topics for years. This time they have decided to simply record themselves having one of these such conversations. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be treated as advice or actual people's opinions. The group will commonly play devil's advocate and use tropes such as sarcasm and satire. If you get offended, it's your own fault. Today's topic, micronations and no-go zones.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Eat a Bag of Dicks. Or insert whatever the name of this thing is called. Really quick to introduce ourselves, I am Thomas, the no-filtered one.
I'm Oscar, the bearded one.
I'm Brooke and I'm tired.
And I'm Tyler. I have freckles.
That's lovely. We're all gathered here today because each and every single one of you are intellectuals with a professional curiosity toward a more free government or just want to be left alone. Obviously, I'll bleep that. We are not preppers. We are not saying the US will ever become as free as the libertarians dream. We are not saying the US will fall, only get more corrupt, or the apocalypse is near. We are merely curious in the theoretical. How would we make the freest country on earth? Or go about our lives in a way in which we feel freer? Or do we just want to start a cult? Whatever. Anyway.
Oh my God.
Okay, so check it. I've been doing a ton of research lately on micronations, and I wanted to get your feedback on them. A micronation is typically any unrecognized small nation, usually encompassed by another. There are hundreds out there, most in either the US or Europe, but there are a handful in South America, Australia, Antarctica, you name it. Most of these are composed of under a few dozen people per micronation, but quite a number of them are in the tens to hundreds of thousands. If you also include countries like, or I should say country, like Taiwan, Kurdistan, Palestine, or a number of other states that have yet to be fully recognized by all other countries, you could even say this could be up in the millions. The other micronations vary in resources and often get accused of just role playing because they dress like royalty or members of the aristocracy and they give themselves fancy titles for their entire family. But most just typically agree that they can run their small piece of land better than the current government ever could, and they just want to change that. This motivates them, which alone I think is pretty positive for society, and you never know, they may one day also happen to achieve maximized freedom or production or however they measure success. Anyway, here are some micronations you may have never heard of. There's a place called the Glacier Republic, which is about 40,000 person group in South America that are dedicated to protecting the region's water reserves and preventing mining. There's also a place called Republic of Molossia, a former communist government turned republic government in Nevada, but it only contains about 30 people. There's also Transnistria, a 500,000 person breakaway state in Moldova, Eastern Europe, that's clinging to the shell of the former Soviet Union. They even got a bunch of statues of Lenin and everything still. What else? There's also Atlantium, an empire encompassed by Australia, go figure. The Arakan Empire, a dictatorship in Canada by some guy named Eric. Ruritania, I don't know. An absolute monarchy, I think in the United States. There's Asgardia, a micronation outer space. New Utopia, micronation for land that doesn't even yet exist above sea level. Heck, there's even about 12 micronations just in Ohio, if that gives you a scale of how many there could be out there. And that's not even the best part. There's a BDSM matriarchy in Czechia called the Otherworld Kingdom, and an endless amount of libertarian paradises such as Liberland, I don't know, Frestonia, the Principality of Fredonia, Republic of Minerva, if it even still exists, and countless others. Anyway, given this, BDSM state and all, now that we all know we're talking about the same thing, what are your thoughts? Do we do it? How do we do it? What would you like to see if we did it?
I guess for me, micronations that are, I guess, not substantial, but they're pretty big in size, where they have more than just a couple hundred people. That's probably something that would be good to kind of challenge like existing states, because they're groups of people that just kind of came together and want to have a different sort of doctrine. They want to live under a different doctrine than existing states. But when it comes to smaller ones, I think it's more like an idealistic view of it, where if the end goal is to have like a lot of millions of these little micronations, what happens when there's millions of them, but then there's one big dog? What happens when that big dog has too many resources and then just stampedes over all of the little ones? I think one of the reasons why we've gotten so far is because there's been these big groups of states, I suppose, that were able to stop each other from going into certain areas. And I think right now we're in a state of there's more equilibrium, where it's like mutually assured destruction. I think that's stopped a lot of terrible things from happening, and eventually we get world war. So, but yeah, it's a quick recap of my thought process.
Brooke, thoughts? Or Tyler, thoughts? Micronations, funny, possible? Should we be doing them?
I think the concept is definitely appealing, especially like kind of like what Oscar was saying in the idealistic sense. I think if you look at something like it's kind of similar in a way to the Balkan states, which haven't fared too well overall. So you have that thought process as well. That's kind of, I guess, the devil's advocate as to where it could go wrong. Ideally, yeah, I can see the appeal of a micronation, absolutely. And I think that, you know, with some of the larger ones that you stated, it's definitely something that's achievable. But I mean,
is it desirable though? Would you be down to make a micronation?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Especially, you know, as stated earlier, don't necessarily agree with the way that things are going right now. Don't think that things are being handled well overall. So that's for sure a huge appeal.
Is there any sort of spin you would put on it right away? Not a BDSM state. I mean, just like, something. What's the biggest thing you want to fix?
Personal freedoms.
Personal freedoms. Independent liberties? You're insane. It'll never happen.
You know,
what about you, Brooke?
I mean, I think micronations are a great idea in theory. I think we all kind of feel like we're on the same page with that one. I think it would be hard to, in practice, make something successful without many followers. And when you say it like that, it sounds like a cult. I'm down for the BDSM state, so you just let me know how we start that.
Does it surprise you, though, that they still pay taxes to the government that they live in, but they just call it foreign aid?
I mean, no, that's not surprising at all, especially with the way that you worded it, where people are kind of just role playing.
Well, we
pay
don't want
to they pay taxes to the micronation, the people living there, or the micronation pays.
So like the micronation is inside the United States in Nevada, and they're paying the United States the normal income tax and property tax, but they're claiming it's foreign aid to the United States.
Well, that's a hard one, right? Because like
Goodwill.
We're what in the year 2021, 2022 now.
Oh yeah.
I would think every piece of land on Earth is claimed.
We'll get there.
Or maybe not. Or maybe
we got a bunch of places.
Or maybe not, but I think that's definitely a hurdle, because it's like you have an existing system in place. How do you make that transition without mass casualties and all that, you know?
Okay, yeah, definitely remember that you mentioned unclaimed territory, because I got some questions on claim versus unclaimed. What are your opinions of micronations that do not have a historical, tribal, or racial claim? If you think they don't have like legitimacy, like a little bit of something like that, a little bit of Palestine, or a little bit of some kind of long, I was here since before the Mormons, you know, like do you think it gets harder for them? Do you think it would be harder for us or some random Joe down the street created an island. Do you need
Well-
to exist back then? How do you get there?
I think that.
Go
Oh no, go ahead, Oscar.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that like you'd find the groups that have like a historical claim, or like that's already like a preformed group of people. You already have more people. If we went, or Joe Schmo down the street went and tried to start a micronation, you'd have to go through the process of getting followers of people who wanted to be in a micronation, and like it would just, one is definitely harder than the other.
Yeah, I think the only significance that a historic group has is the fact that they have a similar culture, they're tied together, they're closer, they're their own tribe, right? If you had theoretically, if you had like all these group of gamers like all over the US that wanted to make their own micronation of gamers, maybe it's not just gamers. We isolate that it's like all Halo 1 lovers or Halo 2, whatever.
They'll have the fastest internet in the world.
Probably. Maybe they wouldn't even need
More
like,
government
internet,
spending
right?
on internet.
But I think the more it's the reason why it's significant is because they identify with that group and it's part of their identity. Like they will be more loyal to each other versus like Brooke said, Joe Schmo trying to recruit people, and they may not believe in it as much as like, I don't know, historical groups, Kurds and or Mexicans from wherever, like.
So what
Yeah.
if we preyed on like the yoga people here? They just believe in spirituality and rocks and candles, and we create a common culture of oneness and happiness and joy. Don't get personally attacked.
No. Isn't the purpose of starting a micronation though that like you want everyone, like, are you starting it because you just want people underneath you? Because if that's what you're doing and you're manipulating people into joining, you're already not going to have a successful micronation. Like you've already made it so that like you will always be the one, or Joe Schmo, whoever's starting it, will always be seeking more power because he's manipulating people to join his micronation. If we just take
make a note, everyone out there, if you're trying to do like a whole Jonestown thing, make sure you actually believe in the thing and you don't kill your followers. This is Brooke's advice.
No, I just like, if the point of this conversation is
it was successful for a year.
Words.
A successful micronation, I can tell you right now that you won't create a successful one if you're manipulating people to join your nation.
There could be such a thing though as like a shadow government in a micronation, because
inside job.
Well, like, I mean, let's say you started with 5 people, right? And you have this idea, but like maybe you all believe in X amount. And like Tom said, you prey on the yoga people, and then you just you start off, everything's good. After like 20-30 years, maybe you change.
You tell them they have to move to this Fiji island, and then all of a sudden you have more population than Fiji, and then you overthrow them in Fiji, and next thing you know, Lululemon's did social welfare.
Everybody gets social Lululemons.
In regards to bringing it back to whether or not they have a historical or racial claim, kind of that clannish background, I think, especially in terms of historical, that does make it slightly easier because to some extent, you're gonna have some kind of legitimacy behind it. Even if it's not accepted by everyone, there are going to be foreign powers out there that are like, how can I make this work to my favor? Oh, I recognize Palestine as its own sovereign state. It's just like the biggest example that I can think of that would, okay, yeah, that's fair. That makes sense. They have a historical background there.
No, I didn't think about that when I mentioned what I said, because I think that's what happens a lot in like Africa, right? There's all these foreign powers that are like, okay, this group has a legitimate claim. What does that mean? It just means that they're bought in, they're like together, they're this group, and they basically supply arms or supply training, whatever, to get them to be an independent nation. And then from there, they kind of have this sort of, they owe favors to that foreign government.
Do you feel that countries need to be independent, aka producing their own food, providing whatever services you think, in order to be recognized or to be made autonomous? Could they be dependent and still be recognized?
I feel like that's a really tough one, because I'm of the principle that yes, they should be able to provide for their nation, regardless of how small. if you want to have a micronation and be recognized as independent, like you and 3 other people, are you providing communal farming for like, are you creating your own food on that property that you want to be declared independent? Like, we are not associated with the US or France or wherever it's located. We're not associated with them. We provide for our own people. We have set up our own, internet or whatever. Like, yeah, absolutely. Do I think that you can only be recognized if you're doing that? No, because there is that, it kind of ties back into if you have legitimacy and you're being recognized by a foreign power, one, that in itself on the world stage is them going, oh, yeah, no, that's a real thing. Like that, I acknowledge that they're real, and we're gonna send them, 100 pounds of salt and spices, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you need it at all. It could help for sure, but I think in the past there's been examples of, like, let's say you have, the West and the East trying to control the zone, and they have different tribes there, and one country, one state will support a tribe. Maybe they outnumber the other tribe. I'm not sure of the like historical sort of like. I know that in Afghanistan, I think the U.S. supported one specific tribe, whereas Russia maybe supported a separate one. But basically, like, if you have theoretically, theoretically, if you have a group that's maybe like a warrior clan or warrior society, they don't grow much. Maybe they pillage and they steal. One group, like the one other power, supports the farmers, and then one other power supports the warrior state or the warrior society. In that sense, you're gaining legitimacy, you're gaining support, and you are dependent on them, on their food or whatever.
Do you have to go to war to be sovereign if you're not dependent on others?
I think you need help. I think you need help from other states.
So I think that works in places where the supporting country or whatever needs something from that group, but that's the only time that works. If you don't have anything that anybody else needs, then you would have to be able to support yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But if you import a bunch of 3D printers and then start 3D printing 3D printers, and then you create like this giant factory the size of China, and then you start using those 3D printers to print everything on Etsy, you take it over the entire market, corner it, and then you start taking on Amazon, and then maybe.
Sure.
This is more corporate corporate sponsored micronet. But
well, what else are you going to provide? Human trafficking, or non-social security numbered babies?
You got no dad.
Oh, that's dark. Oh.
If you don't have a historical claim or like historical legitimacy to build a micronation, how could you provide, or how could you set yourself up for sovereignty with other nations, like buying into it? Yeah, I think you would have to be good at something. Like, I don't think there's a way to not give any or not provide anything to the global stage.
Okay.
And yeah, because regardless,
if you're China, you just provide only pandas, and if you're the Philippines, you just provide only doctors. Yeah, I got it.
Jesus.
Where do you think in the world it might be the best place to have a micronation if it was to eventually be recognized? Do you think it might be like an island,
Alaska,
a mountain, the ruins of a third world country that's weak, or perhaps one of the unclaimed regions?
I think an island would be great, but if you have nothing on that island and you're starting out with nothing, then an island's not exactly a good choice, because how are you going to get everything there? You need a bunch of shit. The first 30 years are going to suck.
Well, location wise, I think for one,
yoga people don't eat a lot of food. No, they're easy.
If we're talking generalities, I think if I were to start a micronation, it would have to be maybe in a stable area. And what I mean by that is like where the states around you are boring, like the governments around you are boring. Like if you try to start a place like near what was that one place that just got took over? It's like in the Southeast Asia, like I think it was Burma. Myanmar? I think Burma just had Myanmar.
I'll say Burma. Does that even exist anymore? I thought that was changed.
Well, Burma is Myanmar. But
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that one just got took over. Like it was a military takeover of the whole state. So if there's a lot of warfare like that, if you're trying to start a micronation near that, what's to stop that, like someone from like coming in and taking you over? So I think
culture that like was very Second Amendment, but we call it First Amendment
That's true. I
or,
mean,
or Potato Amendment or whatever.
at that point, like how they would have to evaluate whether or not it's worth it to come after you, right? And if you have money to start it off and you have defenses, then yeah, I mean, do they want to kill 5,000 of their people to take over an island of 1,000? Like maybe not.
Okay, so we're gonna cater to gun-toting yoga people. I like this. That's a large population. There's a lot of those out there.
There is a fun overlap between like the new right and yoga people. What does Brie call it? The
New QAnoners,
the-
the freaky ones.
California transplants.
the like
California
hidden
transplants that go into
pipeline.
Texas and learn about guns.
New Age to QAnon pipeline. That's what Brie calls
Oh
it.
yeah. Those ones are. I don't want to comment on it. I don't think we
What happens when
should.
you go so far left that you go right.
Yes, it is a circle. It is
Oh,
a circle.
interesting.
It is a circle. The political spectrum's a circle.
Yeah. So when you go too far left, you end up back on the right
Yeah.
side. Damn it.
I want absolute control. All right, I want freedom again. Okay. All right.
That left versus right thing is interesting because there's a guy he says it's not left versus right. He calls it a political trichotomy, and basically it's communism, individualism, and absolutism. He has a good graph of it. I can share it later on, but basically it's not typical. It's not your typical left or right, and I feel like it's a lot more accurate. It makes a lot of sense. Like you're either for complete individualism, absolutism, which is like monarchies, that sort of stuff, and communism. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely send that over after the show. I've never heard of a political graph being three-dimensional before. Sounds super interesting. So, Brooke and Tyler, because you guys wanted to ask a question on a question, where would you like to live for your micronation? Island, mountain, unclaimed area, ruins of a third world country?
Essentially, what it would come down to is one, the natural resources that you have available, like readily, because that leads to everything else. Like you can either take that internally for growth within your own micronation, you can export that, lead to trade and diplomacy with other, already established states. I think that's what it comes down to. Now, that would also depend on what type of specialization, so to speak, you'd think that your micronation would be going into. If it's farming, you'd probably want to settle somewhere with a nice river flowing through so that you have fertile lands. If you would prefer to mine for minerals, you're going to want to be in the mountains. It's also a slightly more defensible, harder to access. Wouldn't have to worry as much about military invasion. So they all kind of have their trade-offs.
Except the flying monkeys from Wizard of Oz. Never be too sure.
Drones nowadays, you never know.
Like we are about these people trying to secede, and they're growing their own potatoes. We'll bomb them to oblivion.
I mean, if you can pull off something in terms of farming, like what the Mayans did, where you can fertilize hilly mountainous regions, I think that would be the best, hand in hand, because then you would have your set food production that you need and require for your own nation. While any surplus, you can either store that for natural disasters or, ship it off somewhere else for some dosh. You can mine around the area, for anything, especially if you have any rare metals, that's always good. So, I mean, I think that's the best kind of like a mountain, preferably with some fertile land towards the middle or the bottom if possible.
Okay, so you're leaning toward mountains, Brooke's leaning toward islands, Oscar's leaning toward something else.
Well, I mean, I kind of agree with Tyler.
He's also a mountain guy. All right, later, Brooke.
Yeah. Well,
she's just chill on an island. Hawaii sucks.
An island can have mountains. It's not exclusive.
Yeah. No one will move here with me. Oh, okay. Volcano.
But I guess it depends on
Volcano
what size
land.
you're also talking about. Because how do you buy like a huge plot of land that's like the size of Hawaii?
Funny you asked. We got
We
the
know,
lotto. We
actually.
won the lotto. We're there. We're already there. We already got it. We're just trying to figure out if we really want it, or do we put it back on the market? Okay, next question. Are you familiar with no-go zones? This is pretty much any region, anywhere, where the country's rule of law does not apply because it's either too dangerous for law enforcement, aka Detroit, or Chaz a year ago in Seattle. Was it Chaz? What, Chop? What was the name of it?
They changed it to shop.
Chop, Chaz, Chop,
Yeah.
Chaz.
It was both.
Or the zone contains
Actually-
a marginalized group they do not wish
Mhm.
to be seen enforcing, aka Orthodox Jews in New York, the Amish in Pennsylvania, insert everywhere else. Are you familiar with these? And do you think that might be a course of action or the path to becoming sovereign?
I think that's a better course of action, to be honest. I think the issue with micronations is someone knows that you're trying to start this, and you're basically declaring sovereignty versus whoever's around you. You're like, I'm not going to be a part of you. I'm not going to pay taxes to you, which the states hate. But a no-go zone doesn't have to be like that. It could just be as simple as, hey, there's a bunch of, like here in, for example, that's where I'm from. Now that
I'll
said
bleep it.
Here in Southern California, there's a few areas. You have Riverside. There's a lot of
Tuscan Raiders,
more
sand people.
Yeah,
Oh
Tuscan
my
Raiders.
God, Thomas.
Pretty funny.
I was gonna say there's a lot of Mexicans there. That could be sort of like a no-go zone where just people like to live near their own people or their own tribes or whatever. You also have a lot of conservatives they have conservative values. They like guns. They like this. They like that. And people are willing to move to those places just because they share their values. That can be considered sort of like a no-go zone eventually, and it could be less conspicuous than just, hey, all of you surrounding nations, we don't like you, we don't want to pay taxes to you, we're our own thing. It's less abrasive, and you have more time, I think, to kind of grow it. So
Will they defend each other though in the event law enforcement comes in because they're practicing polygamy or they're not paying their taxes or they're hosting Pirate Bay 3.0 and they're like, this is ours, you can't take it from us?
I think it's kind of it's like that mutually assured destruction. Like why do cops maybe not want to go into certain areas of East Los Angeles, what used to be East Los Angeles like 20 years ago? It's because of the threat, not necessarily because they're literally saying I guess it's more the appearance of the danger versus what might happen if all of the Los Angeles Police Department went into East LA. They'd take it over, maybe, possibly, but sending like people to like arrest someone, it's a lot smaller of a group. And it's kind of like that. They have so much guns, so many, you don't know what's exactly in there. Maybe let's not risk it. You know, I have to find a quote, but it's I think from the Gulag Archipelago, they always mention it, but it's like an old poem. It basically says like how things might have changed if every member of the Stasi or the KGB, whoever was hunting all these people, if when they went into homes to take people, to basically take them into gulags, if they have that fear of like, this might be the last time I say goodbye to my kids because I'm going into this unknown territory, because I'm gonna go arrest people. If they had that fear, would things have changed?
Okay,
So
Waco, Texas, but you need like a bunch of those things surrounded like wagon style around prevent.
but it can't be organized.
So they can't shoot your kids.
But
you had the kids on the inside of the establishment.
But it can't be organized, because if it's organized, then all of a sudden it's like an actual like domestic threat, right?
Okay.
So it's
You
more
all
like
get tattoos of your country, but you don't talk about it.
possibly.
Never forget Maritoya. Oh, hail Maritoya.
Is that the one with the little old white
I think it's
lady that was-
Maritania. I don't know. I'm just whatever
was
you're
the
okay.
queen?
Do you remember Family Guy? Pretoria. He created his own
Yes.
country. Flew his face on a flag. Jesus.
And then the whole
Yeah.
National Guard came. Yeah, I remember.
That's a misappropriation of government resources if I ever saw one.
So I'm not honestly sure that it would help or not, because the way that you described it, it made it sound more like it would be specific to an ethnic group than anything.
Well, it could also just be like a dangerous area like Detroit, like 7 Mile. They don't want to touch 7 Mile. They're like, nope, we ain't going in here. They just have a gang that wears they cover their faces and they all look like the people from The Purge. And they go, nope. They hear those sirens, and even the cops go running. We ain't messing with that.
I mean, yeah, but that would fall primarily on when it comes to at least here our Second Amendment rights. Like it's that Oscar was right on point with that. I think that they have to feel that fear and know that
Okay.
I could go in here. There's also a high probability I can get shot. Do I want to take that chance? So I mean, that would definitely be the deciding factor in that case as to what could be a no-go zone.
What do you think? What do you think is a better path forward? Micronation, no-go zone, or one before the other? If so, which one?
What's the end goal?
Ultimate free rights, if that was the thing that we were going for here. The right to do anything that doesn't affect other people.
If you decided, say, to set one up in California, you cannot really create much of a no-go zone. Like, I think that the state, not even necessarily, the federal government, I think the state would step in prior to that.
You would have to be a really big no-go zone, or really out in the boonies.
I suppose. I think that going with a micronation and it would be simpler to attempt to find investment or find a way to create the funds to create a micronation than it would to be to create something that is considered a no-go zone.
Okay.
I think the straight path to it would be the micronation. Like that would be the quickest path to your goals. Whether it's sustainable, I mean, that's tough to wonder. But I think not the better approach, but just the more realistic approach would be the no-go zone. But again, it would be like you probably wouldn't like see the fruits of your labor. It would probably be over like the course of 30 years. And it's just more like, again, it's just more like, where are people migrating to? Like maybe Texas becomes sort of like a no-go zone in a sense, because the people moving there are the ones that don't buy into all the policies that California, New York, and all these other places are setting. So over time, the mentality of the population changes, and the majority of the people in Texas becomes more anti-state, or maybe not anti-state, but anti-federal government, right? And I think we've seen that in a short period of time with COVID, with the COVID lockdowns. Like I remember a long time ago, you would never have in Southern California, you would never have like bottle rockets and fireworks in on the streets, right? Because it's illegal. The cops would come and because no one ever did it. But through the COVID lockdowns, I feel like people understand how little power the government has. When the majority of people don't care, they don't care about the repercussions, they can't do anything. It's not an analogy, but something that's very similar. Look at San Francisco. You have Walgreens and all these other places, Target, shutting down because people keep stealing, right? 2 years ago, I'm sure there were shoplifters, and every Target, Walgreens, they have that accounted for in their books. If you've ever worked retail, they understand that they're gonna what is it called, loss prevention. They understand that every year they're gonna lose X amount percent every year. That's just a given, because that's how many criminals come to their stores. But what happens when a slightly larger percentage stop caring and they start stealing? What happens when Joe Schmo, he's paying his taxes, he always goes there for a drink and some chips or whatever. All of a sudden he sees people coming in. Every time he goes, someone takes something. And then that guy's mind might change and be like, why am I paying for this if everyone else doesn't?
Tyler,
eventually,
did you want to say something? Oh,
yeah, sorry. No, go ahead.
No, it's all good. But in regards to that specific example, that's because the mayor, the governor, the mayor for San Francisco in that case, they had instituted something where it was allowed up to $998. You can take up to that amount and you will not be prosecuted at all. Like they will just let you go. So of course, yeah, people are going to take advantage of that. One, people are going to try and test that, absolutely. And then they're going to see, well, they still haven't changed that law, so why would I not just continue doing so?
But fireworks are still illegal. They're not legal in California. And this last New Year's Eve, I feel like every corner had like fireworks.
I feel like it's
July 4th, 2020. Remember the video from like drones up top? All of LA had fireworks. And it's because people didn't care anymore, even though it was still illegal. And what can the police do?
Well, and those are also
an example of like oh, in my neighborhood that happened, but like this is on a much larger scale than just like decided
I'm not,
to set off fireworks.
it's not like a disagreement thing. I completely agree. Yeah, a lot more people are realizing, because one, that's not something that they're going to go after regardless. They're going to what? Try and figure out who shot off fireworks.
There was a time when they would, though.
Yes,
I feel like
exactly.
in the 50s they would have been like, "Who's doing that?"
No, even
Yeah.
even as
The neighbors will
like
snitch
in
because they're like, "I was
2018,
having really quiet
2017.
baby sleeping time," and
But-
the neighbors were.
I guess what I'm saying is like once people like stop caring, like when the mentality changes, that's when it can become that sort of no-go zone. Because look at what current no-go zones, like maybe like in Sweden or maybe like in the UK, right? Where there's these groups
all the
of
migrants.
foreigners.
Yep.
Yes, there's these groups of foreigners. Their mentality is not the same mentality as a typical like UK citizen or like an England resident. It's more like it's the culture's different, and yeah, they
Right.
just their mentality is different. So I think no-go zones might be more of a not spontaneous, but it's a less organized way of doing it, and it might even be more maybe not last longer, but it might be more feasible.
Even still, in regards to that, like that particular example, again, those are all ethnic, like that's specific to immigration and from an ethnic standpoint, because the
Right.
culture that they're bringing in is also already established and everything. What I'm thinking of is if I were to try to establish a no-go zone,
But that's what Chaz
it's
was.
getting people together under the same like thought process.
But Chaz was started with the intention of like helping with the BLM riots, but it was just a bunch of white people.
But
That's
they were
what it
making a
became.
safe haven for BLM people.
But
Yeah,
I guess,
okay.
But they were
I guess the
judge,
point-
jury, and executioners, and the immigration, and the collecting bribes from shop owners.
with a no-go zone, it's not some one person being like, hey, let's create this, or like 10 people being like, hey, let's do this. It's more like, think about it. If you move to a new city and you're, I guess Southern California, if you've ever been here, if you're around here, there are certain neighborhoods you don't want to live in. Did somebody create that neighborhood and decide, hey, let's make this neighborhood like this? No, it just happened over time. Like that was the affordable like,
Brooke, question?
Disagree.
sure, yeah.
I disagree that those neighborhoods weren't forced into that scenario.
You're talking about like redistricting and like
Yeah.
red line laws, or is it red line laws? No, thinking Chicago, like
I know what you're talking about. I don't know what it's
Yeah.
called though. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I did just on that example alone, I disagree. Those neighborhoods that, especially here,
Sure,
We're
but
definitely-
but then even then over time, like now, you wouldn't want to move in. You
Yeah.
like for example, like you have like a certain neighborhood.
you want to move.
What is it?
That's kind of nice.
Logan,
I don't
it's
know.
See,
really
that's
nice
what's
now.
happening.
That's gentrification. Though.
Yeah,
that's
that's
completely
Right,
gentrification.
The gays
but
moved
what-
in.
No, oh my god.
But what is gentrification? It's just a nice
Made it
apartment
all
building
nice.
that pops up.
I mean,
and
but it
certain
is
people
because
want to live there.
as value of property starts going up, you push out the people that were forced to be in those neighborhoods in the first place, and they've
Or
been
the
there for-
people that own property, they're like, ooh, let me cash out, let me sell this, let me make a profit. They lived there in the 50s, they sell, and like it's no-go zones. I don't think you plan them. They're just it happens, and you can decide to kind of be a part of it by moving to those places that have where they share your values.
Shoot, I'm sorry, guys. I think we need to have a hard break right here. I promise next time we're going to cover claim versus unclaimed land. We'll get there. Blah, blah, blah. Like and subscribe, blah, blah, blah. We don't really care, but if you'd like it, we'll make more. Your call. Anyway, we hope to see you guys for future episodes. Take care.